Welcome. The weekly walk will begin shortly. Weekly Walk Children's District with Ryan, July 21st, 2021, Central Park Conservancy. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Ryan, and welcome to Central Park. We're so happy to be doing live tours again, but even though things are kind of returning to normal, we want to still provide access in various different ways, like through virtual programming. So we're continuing things like our weekly walks. So thank you so much for attending a weekly walk today, a short informal 15-minute walk through a various landscape of Central Park. We're going to be together for about 15 minutes. Just about all the photos you're going to see were taken by myself here in Central Park over the past week, with the exception of just a few that I accessed through a bunch of different databases and archives like the New York City Parks Department Photo Archive, the New York Public Library Photo Archive, the Museum of the City of New York, as well as some other things like Getty Images. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us today. As you probably know, I'm a member of the Central Park Conservancy, and we're the nonprofit organization that really help to take care of Central Park, helping to keep it clean and green. Our mission here at the Central Park Conservancy, sorry about that, my screen seems to be freezing up a little bit. There we are. Our mission here at the Central Park Conservancy is to preserve and celebrate Central Park as a sanctuary from the pace and pressures of city life, enhancing the enjoyment and well-being of all. Of course, as you probably know, attending these weekly walks, we're using Zoom. So if you do want to say hello or share a favorite memory of the park or check links for upcoming programs, please refer to the chat feature. If you do have a question, please use the Q&A, and my colleagues, Jose and Juan, will be on the back end answering questions you might have. Last thing you'll see pop up are some visitor polls. I'll launch one of those through the walk today and then share the results. You'll also notice we're continuing to use live transcripts. You can turn those off in your Zoom toolbar option if you're using a PC, or if you're using a tablet or a cell phone device or smartphone, you can turn those off in the Zoom settings of your account settings. Otherwise, we're going to jump right into our walk of the Children's District. Now, if anybody here is a Zoom or I should say weekly walk veteran, you're probably familiar with the Children's District because this is about the second or third time that we've walked through this area. The Children's District is really kind of grouped all in the southern section of Central Park. It was an original landscape that you might have guessed featured different types of features and landscapes that were very friendly and accommodating to kids. Over the 150 plus year existence of Central Park, we've seen the Children's District kind of expand a bit, incorporating new additions that the park has seen that are great for both kids and adults. And we'll explore some of the historic traditional areas of the Children's District, as well as a few that have come in over time. As we explore in the park, we're going to begin our walk over on 67th Street and 5th Avenue on the east side of the park, entering in on a nice sunny hot day. Today here in New York, we have a lot of rain that just poured in, so we can live in the moment through these nice sunny photos and pretend we're somewhere a little bit warmer. But as we walk in the park, we're coming in on a nice hot sunny day, and we can see that with the sun's rays literally coming down, changing the color of some of the photos. And as we walk through the park coming in, we'll bear a left and we'll try to hop under as much shade as possible. But really beautiful lush green colors we're seeing as summer is taking full effect here in Central Park. And as we walk down the path, we can come under some of the archways, like the Dean's Mouth Archway, which will lead us to a portion of the Central Park Zoo. As we start to come through this archway, we can see a little bit of what is known as the Tisch Children's Zoo. The Tisch Children's Zoo is actually a subsection of the Central Park Zoo, which opened in 1961. It was actually largely funded by Senator Robert H. Lehman, who donated about $500,000 to help create this zoo in celebration of his 50th marriage anniversary to his wife. We see the zoo incorporating a lot of smaller animals, or bigger but small animals for children, like llamas, pigs, cows. There was a monkey at one point, and really all fashioned into a nice little pet feeding and petting area, I guess, a petting zoo rather. We did see at one point a Noah's Ark type feature here, as well as a medieval castle feature. It was renovated in the 1990s, And we can see one beautiful addition being the Lehman gates, which were designed by Paul Manship and sport a really traditional type of feeling that Box and Olmsted, the creators of the park, probably would have appreciated. Originally, the architecture of the zoo did look a little bit different. And in the 1960s, we see really a pop architecture taking over the whole area. As we can see, some of that pop style architecture was lost when this zoo reopened in 1997. But even though some of the architecture transitioned into a more traditional style that would have been more in line with Central Park's original creation, we do see plenty of the original features remaining, the important ones at least, like the petting zoo aspect of this area. This photo showing an example of such, and coming from Julie Larson Mayer, one of the members of the Wildlife Conservation Society, the group that oversees Central Park zoos, as well as New York zoos. As we do continue down out past the Tisch Children's Zoo, we'll come under the Dean's Mouth Arch, and we'll see a statue just peeking through the end of it, which is going to be the very beautiful Honey Bear statue. Honey Bear, looks like he's doing a little dance move welcoming us in, is just on the north entrance to the Central Park Zoo. And as we look a little bit closer, we can see some nice detail along the base, something fun to see on a hot summer day, a water feature. These little frogs spewing out water are certainly a nice little visual as well as sound to hear on this hot, humid summer day. And along the base, we can actually see a name carved down there. That name is Frederick Roth. And Frederick Roth was a very popular sculptor in American history whose work can be seen all throughout the area nearby the zoo, as well as Central Park in general. We can actually see him being the sculptor of that honey bear statue, which was installed in 1937, as well as a dancing goat statue located on the south entrance. Here we see a picture of Frederick Roth, who was the New York City Parks Department sculptor from 1934 to 1936, with an early rendition of what is arguably his most famous statue, the Balto statue, located just a little north where we're walking. This image coming from Getty Images from 1925. As we continue past the Honey Bear statue, we'll come out to the Central Park Zoo area. And as we're walking down along this path, walking towards the south, we're passing by a little small section of the Arsenal pictured here on our left-hand side, which is the oldest building to exist or the oldest municipal building really to exist here in Central Park, just after the blockhouse. And as we come by, we can see just across from the Arsenal, some people viewing something just past the gate. Let's go get a closer look and see what they're viewing. As we hang to the right, we can make our way through this maze of the zoo area, seeing some beautiful flora along the way, and coming up to something that is stealing everybody's attention. The main center point of the zoo, we see this large tank of water, and what we see inside are none other than the wonderful sea lions of the Central Park Zoo. It might be interesting to see animals in Central Park, but animals were an original feature, many being gifted in the early and late 1850s as Central Park was being created. We see the large quantities of animals leading to a menagerie being established. And in 1860, there was the intention to put them in a different landscape, but they ended up really staying right where they were being kept, which is in this area behind the Arsenal building. We can sort of just see that area in the very, very back of this photo. We would see it changing up a little bit differently, and around 1934, a zoo renovation would occur. Some of the shaping of that renovation still being present today. We would see a major decline occurring over that period of time, and eventually we would see some changes coming. In 1980, the Zoological Society would actually take over caring for all of the animals, like these sea lions here in the park, as well as all of the 3 zoos at that time in New York City. We would see some major restoration occurring between 1983 and 1988, with this zoo eventually opening in 1988. And today we can see one of that 1934 renovations right in front of us, the Sea Lion Tank, which features a wonderful home for the sea lions and offers us a great spot to see them getting fed. If you do stop by the Central Park Zoo at 11:30 a.m., 1:30 p.m., or 3:30 p.m., you can see feeding of the sea lions. And during this time, we can not only see them getting fed, but maybe performing a few tricks as well, like a little handstand we see here. The sea lions are certainly a great area to sit in and view wildlife here in Central Park. And the Wildlife Conservation Society, which cares for the animals and the zoo here, do a wonderful job of making sure these animals live a very happy life. And as we do look back, we can remember the opening of the current zoo we have today, which was in August 8th of 1988. This picture coming from the New York City Parks Department website shows Mayor Ed Koch feeding Finn the sea lion during that initial reopening. We do have a wonderful zoo today with 3 different sections, and I highly encourage visitors of the park to stop by and see some of the wonderful wildlife. Before we do leave the zoo, we can look at some of the neat little architecture surrounding it, like some of these beautiful granite carved eagles. Some of these eagles look pretty reminiscent of eagles that once stood on the old Penn Station building, but actually these are from a different location. These are actually coming from the Bay Ridge overpass in Brooklyn. Here we can see an older photo of this. This overpass was built in 1912. And when this bridge was getting demolished in 1941, to make way for the Belt Parkway, we see these eagles being relocated to the Central Park Zoo. It actually was unknown for quite some time, but thanks to some New York City Parks Department historians, they were able to find a small account of these eagles being transferred to the zoo in a 1941 report. And here we can see the original location of these eagles, a fun little piece of architecture housed around the sea lion tank in the Central Park Zoo. As we do make our way out of the zoo, enjoying some fun little wildlife encounters, we'll make our way wrapping towards the west side of the park, leaving this zoo area and hanging a right just around the exit to bring us through one of the 30 remaining ornamental bridges and arches in Central Park, In-Scope Arch. And as we do pass through the arch, I do want to launch a poll since we visited the zoo, which I think is one of my favorite sections in the park, or at least in the children's section. I want to launch a poll and see if anybody's ever visited a New York City zoo. That's a multiple choice question, so you can vote, or multiple answer question. So feel free to vote in multiple if you've been to multiple zoos. And since that zoo makeover in the 1980s, we have seen the addition of 2 extra zoos in New York City, bringing the total up to 5, plus 1 really nice aquarium as well. I'll let people vote in that. And as we continue down through In-Scope Arch, we'll make our way through this transition into that sunny opposite side. And coming through the way, we'll pass through, so again, some of the lush green of the park, making our way up a little north right now to a pretty wide open landscape. One that usually is very noisy, but during this time is very quiet. This is Woolman Rink, which usually during the summer is transformed into Victorian Gardens, an amusement park for children here in the southern section. But this year, like past year, it's been a little bit different, and we see this area actually being a lot quieter. A very different transition from what we normally are used to. But if we turn around, we can see a lawn that appears to be really serving people in a more relaxing way. This little lawn offering a nice, quiet, shady spot for people to picnic and beat the heat. And just in the background, we can see a building behind a fence. The building that we can see in view is that of the dairy. This photo coming from the New York Public Library shows the dairy around 1871 when it initially opened. You might have guessed from the name, the dairy originally had milk served there, offering refreshments such as milk, which you could not so surprisingly imagine was a very hard commodity to get back before refrigeration existed. Serving refreshments like milk was really a wonderful aspect of this building, as well as renting small materials for children to play on the lawn that we're looking over and that we can see in this photo. You can imagine, like a lot of Central Park, especially architecture, it was worn down and deteriorated over time. The main part of this building in view, the wooden loggia in the front, was deteriorating and eventually was torn down. And by the about mid 19th to 20th, or late 19th to early 20th century, we do see this really falling into great disrepair and being closed down. Our first initial restoration, one of our first initial restorations at the Central Park Conservancy, was restoring the dairy in 1979. And as we can see presently, the dairy has come up on its second restoration some 40 years later. A lot of this work here in Central Park never has a finish line or end date, because even things that have already been restored are coming onto their second and even third restorations. Here in Central Park, keeping this park looking beautiful is a never-ending goal, and we certainly, again, couldn't do it without the help of individuals like yourselves. So we appreciate you supporting us here at the Conservancy, as well as learning about why it's important to preserve many of these traditional aspects. As we do pass by the dairy, we'll say goodbye. We can expect this restoration to be completed actually at the end of this year, and we can see the dairy returning to being one of 5 operational visitor centers here in Central Park. As we pass by the dairy, we'll make our way to our last few stops, coming through Drip Rock Arch and making our way a little bit more west in the park. As we do come over, we can see a little bit of architecture peeking through the shady trees, and that architecture is going to come from Heckscher Playground, the first permanent playground to come into the park, opening around 1926, getting its name from August Heckscher. And we can see this playground, though, looking a little bit empty on the hot days such as today. And the reason it's empty is because, again, it's very hot, so we see people exchanging the stone and metal slides for water features, which most of the about 22 playgrounds in the park have. Water features like splash pads and other different things to really beat the heat, which are a very big heaven sent for the community members that use these playgrounds. If we turn our attention just behind us, we can actually see a field with a different type of recreation, a little bit of an open meadow type of play. And we see some kids actually playing soccer here, which is a very traditional and historic image to see, because looking over at these Heckscher ball fields across from the Heckscher playground, we are looking at the original playground for Central Park. Would have looked a little something like this, though. The original playground, not of course having playground equipment, but really being an open meadow, this being the original boys' playground. The creators of the park wanted to initially put 3 playgrounds in the park, one here where Heckscher ball fields are today, one near the North Meadow Recreation Center and Meadow area, and one where the Metropolitan Museum exists today. This was the only one that really came to fruition. And we see it being used by, of course, many different kids as an early playground. Today, we do see playgrounds becoming more modernized. And in 1926, we see an early image here of Heckscher Playground opening with permanent equipment. Something that was not really agreed upon by everybody, but of course, from this photo, we can see it was heavily used and would lead to the addition of future playgrounds coming to the park. Those being placed around the outsides of Central Park, so they're easy to access from community members. As we continue along, we can see today baseball being the main activity to occur on Heckscher ball fields. And we do see the baseball diamonds really becoming popular in the 1900s, with initially boys beginning playing here on the fields, and eventually adults being permitted to play baseball towards the 1920s. In that 20th century, we do see the baseball diamonds and hard backstops eventually being added, with 5 fields located on this section and another additional field located just off to the left, bringing the total of 6 baseball diamonds or softball diamonds in this lower southern section of the park. Continuing on, we'll come up to our last stop or two, taking a moment to be a little adventurous like a kid and do a little bit of rock climbing as we venture up to where those people are sitting just in the distance. As we do make our way over the sandy field, we'll take a little bit more of an adult way though. Rather than climbing up the rock like a free climber, we'll walk up these rock carved steps, kind of like the same thing, more of like a cheat, but allowing us to come up a really amazing piece of geological history. Walking on these steps makes us feel a lot more connected when we're visiting the park, and coming up to this little high point will give us a nice view of a piece of architecture that might be more seldom visited in this area. It's called Pine Bank Arch, an arch we visited plenty times before, one of 5 remaining cast iron bridges in the park, and the southernmost cast iron bridge you'll see, with its name coming from the trees we can see growing just around the bank of its base. Now, as we come over Pine Bank Arch, we'll come to our final viewpoint and final location for the tour today. And as we've been walking, we can see that, of course, the park has changed up a lot, whether you've had the opportunity to make it to the park in person, or if you've just been attending with us virtually. We can see that, of course, the past few years have really changed a lot in the way we do things and really what we rely on. While things like Victorian gardens and amusement parks may have been the big draws and hits early on, we see really our views and kind of needs changing. And I wanted to end our walk today with a simple but important view for really the real heroes of the park and landscapes, which are simple things like lawns and meadows. These seemingly really unvisited landscapes, ones that might not have big draws or big features around them, have really been the saving grace for Central Park and for, I'm sure, a lot of parks and people all throughout. While certain playgrounds and amusement parks may have been closed, we've relied on some of the early traditional playgrounds being open fields and areas to enjoy picnicking and playing. So I do want to take a moment to give a big years. So thank you to the lawns and to everybody that's made them feel like traditional playgrounds. This does bring us to the end of our walk in the Children's District, but I do want to end our poll, and it looks like we have almost an exact tie. Actually got 2% more for the Central Park Zoo over the Bronx Zoo. No matter what zoo you go to, they're all incredible. And if you haven't been to a zoo yet, I encourage you to visit one. Whether you go to a natural zoo, which could just be a woodland in Central Park and seeing bird life, or going to a zoo managed by the Wildlife Conservation Society, you certainly can't go wrong supporting and viewing wildlife. And if you haven't heard of some of these zoos, there's definitely others to check out, as well as an aquarium that's really amazing. As we do wrap up, I do want to extend a thank you again to yourselves for joining us and making these walks special, as well as making the parks and lawns and landscapes like this one special. And I do want to extend a very big thank you to the Wildlife Conservation Society, the people that really do an amazing job of caring for the wildlife within the zoos, as well as managing all the zoos in New York. Thank you for doing a wonderful job and for allowing me to take a few photos to share with all of you. So thank you everybody for joining us on our weekly walk today. We of course will be back next week, this being the route that we walked today. We do encourage you to keep joining us on different upcoming programs. As we did announce, we do have live tours continuing, but we're still doing our virtual tours. So if you can't make it to the park, join us for our continuing weekly walks every Wednesday at 12:30, as well as various other programs. Like tomorrow, I'll be doing our first summer tree tour of the season, tomorrow at 3 p.m., as well as various other full-length virtual tours and of course in-person tours. You can check the chat now and my colleagues will drop some links for some of those upcoming virtual programs. Feel free to also drop a question in the Q&A if you do want to link to any specific type of program. And I will keep this open for a few more moments to answer any questions you might have. But thank you everybody so much for supporting us and for joining us on another weekly walk. From all of us here at the Central Park Conservancy, stay safe, be well, and we'll see you soon. Thank you for visiting Central Park from home. Share your hashtag MyCentralParkStories with centralparknyc.org/MyCentralPark or share on social media at Central Park NYC. Stay safe, be well.